I'm Charlie with US Water Systems, and today we're going to do a install for an infusion iron and sulfur eradication system, and we're also going to talk about operation along the way. When you get your system, the very first thing that you want to do is lay everything out and make sure you have everything that you're supposed to have. Now, depending on the size of the system will depend on how many boxes of actual carbon that you get. So this particular unit is a 2 cubic foot unit, so we get 2 cubic foot of carbon, which are in boxes about this size, and then we get a box of gravel that will go with that as well. I believe it's 20 pounds for a 2 cubic foot, but you want to make sure that you have this ready before you start, and then you should get a funnel as well. It will come in with, if you want to pan down, it'll come with the actual control valve, the upper basket for the control valve, and then the manual will come with that box as well. Now, when you open your tank, you're going to want to inspect the tank for damage, obviously on the outside, to see if there's any damage, but you want to pull this center distributor tube out and make sure there's no damage here. If there's any kind of hole or breach in this particular part of the system, it could mean that carbon would make it throughout your home. So make sure you check this, make sure nothing's cracked or broke and everything is secure. Make sure it's glued and no kind of cracks in the tubing anywhere. The top of the tube should be rounded off with no burrs. If you find any burrs on there, you want to clean the burrs off because we don't want to actually cut the O-ring when we put it in there. Now, when we install these in the tank, there's actually an indentation in the bottom of the tank that this will actually fit into. If you have it wrong, it'll protrude the top of the tank like so. When it's exactly in the center, it should go flush and be flush with the top of the tank. And you can use a flashlight or you can do it by feel, it's whatever you're comfortable with, but you'll know when you have it down in there because it'll be flush with the top of the tank. You won't even be able to see it from the side. So make sure you get that in there properly. Now, what I like to do is first kind of decide where I'm going to install this system. We definitely want it close to the interim of the water system. If you use this for outside irrigation, you're probably going to spend its treatment capabilities pretty quick. I would recommend that you sprout off outside irrigation prior to this. You're going to want this somewhere close to the beginning of the home. If you have any kind of sediment filtration, you're going to want to put that in first and then put this afterwards. But this would definitely go before a softener. That way we can knock out most of the iron and sulfur smell prior to the softener. Now, once you've decided on a location, there's a few different things that you're going to think about. One of them would be, where is my water pipe and what size? But also, do I have a drain line close and do I have a power source close? Because you're going to need all that. Now, since this is a backwashing carbon filter, it's going to backwash at a much higher flow rate than water softeners. So make sure whatever drain source you have is adequate to take a substantial flow. This particular 2 cubic foot unit, I believe it backwashes at around 7 gallons per minute. As they get bigger, that gets higher. We have units that backwash all the way up to 10 gallons and 15 gallons per minute. So in those cases, make sure you have adequate drain to accept this particular backwash water. Usually an 1.5 inch standpipe or some type of 1.5 inch connection at some point, or if you want to use like a laundry sink, we've done that before, just as long as it can take the backwash water from this particular unit. So once we've determined that the tank is okay, we have all our media, one of the first things we would do is fill the tank. So to fill the tank, we're going to take a piece of duct tape and we're going to put across the top of the actual tube in here, because when we pour this gravel in, we pour this carbon in, we don't want gravel or carbon getting inside the tube. So I'm going to grab some duct tape and we're going to put the duct tape on here, and then I'll show you kind of how the funnel is used as well. Once you have your duct tape, what I usually do is pull the tube up and then fold it over the top like that, and then bring it together with a couple ears here what that'll do is that'll give you something to grab a hold of and pull it back off when you're done. So once you've done that, again, make sure you center it back in the center of the tank like it's supposed to. And then we're going to put the funnel in with this tube being in the center of the funnel hole. Now, when you fill this, you're going to put the gravel in first, and then you're going to put all the carbon that we sent to you. We don't send extra carbon. Now, the other thing I want to talk about too is when we're talking about the distributor tube here, we have different styles. You may see different styles when you get it. There's no reason to worry about that if it doesn't match the video, particularly even the upper basket, because we have different styles. So they all work the same, and we wouldn't send anything that wasn't compatible with your unit. So don't worry if you have something that looks a little different when it comes to the distributor tube or the upper basket, because that's something that happens commonly, and we take phone calls for that. But once we've taped this off and we have the funnel in place, we'll put the gravel in first, and then we'll put all the carbon in. Now, when you put this in, you want to kind of shake the tank because we want it to kind of fill evenly if we can. It's never a bad idea to have a helper for this. A helper can hold the funnel, but they also can hold a shop vac in the area and will collect any carbon dust that may arise from filling this tank. That'll keep it from getting all over everything in the room and leaving a black dust on everything. I highly recommend that you use some type of a dust mask as well as eye protection. If you get a shard of carbon in your eye, it can be painful and kind of hard to get out of there because of the way it's shaped. So wear the adequate personal protective equipment as well. But again, a helper can hold this funnel as you're pouring these bags, because these bags aren't terribly heavy, but they're around 30 pounds each. So they can hold that in place and also hold a funnel off to the side to actually stop any dust from forming in the room. So once we've filled this up, then we're going to prepare the actual valve to be installed on the tank. So we're going to fill this up, and then we're going to come back and start to put the valve on the tank. Okay, when you get your valve, it's going to have a clamp and then a threaded portion in the bottom that goes in the tank. Now, there's an O-ring here and there's an O-ring here. This O-ring seals off that center tube that we were talking about. We put the tape over. This outer O-ring seals on this nylon ring to keep the water in the tank and not to come out. So what we want to do is we want to lube these O-rings up. So we're going to get some food grade silicone grease. So we take a little bit of the food grade silicone grease. You don't need a bunch, just put a little bit there and a little bit here, and then rub it around on the O-rings. Rub it around this O-ring as well. What this will do is it'll keep those O-rings from pinching on anything and binding. So once we've lubed both the O-rings, now we're going to install the upper basket. And again, don't get hung up on this. This is a gray one. It may be white, it may be different, it might be wider, it may have a couple screws in it. They all work the same. It's not that big a deal if it's a little different. Once you get this, it kind of works like a push and turn. So you put it into where it fits in the slots, and then turn it in place, and then it locks, and then it should stay in there. Now, the particular 2510 valves now are coming with a pretty big transformer now. They recently had to go to a Class 6 transformer, so the old transformers they couldn't use. Currently, I don't think they have a good source for a compact Class 6, so right now we're all going to have to just deal with this in the industry. But I'm going to show you when we get done. I think it's a good idea to mount this, not to leave it hang. But for this point in the install, we're going to just secure it on the back here so we can install the valve on the tank. So to do that, you're going to take the hole in the bottom of the basket, and you're going to line it up with the tube that's in the tank. Slide it down on there, and you'll feel it kind of fall into the center hole. There it goes. And then slowly start to screw it on, and make sure you don't get it cross-threaded, because this thing should spin in pretty easy. If it doesn't spin in easy, then you probably have it cross-threaded. So take your time, make sure it spins in. I mean, it literally should spin in this easy. You should be able to just spin it with your hand. And then once you get it where it's snug, then I take and tighten it a little bit tighter with my hands, and then now you can actually take the palm of your hand and just give it a couple wraps there just to make sure it's nice and snug. Now I'm going to leave this up here just so it doesn't fall on us right now, but I would really suggest that you mount this to the wall once we're finished here. Now that we have this basically prepared, we're ready to do the actual install in the home. We'll go through the programming after we've installed it. So there's a couple of key things to remember when we're talking about this. I'm going to try this. Hopefully this allows it to go to the floor so we can get it out of our way. Okay, what I want to show you on the top here is this stainless steel bypass. This is your in and out connection for your plumbing. If you can look on here, can you see the arrows? On the arrows, the arrow pointing towards the unit would be the inlet. The arrow pointing away from the unit would be the outlet. It's very important that you get this correct, so make sure you double check yourself. But the inlet points toward, the outlet points away. So once we know that, then we're going to start installing this in our location. While we're here too, let's talk about the drain. This particular unit uses a smaller drain that will come with a hose barb here. This hose barb is a 1/2 inch OD, so you'll need a tubing that's a 1/2 inch ID, 5/8 OD to go over this for your drain. The drain does not come with the system. It's going to be something that you'll buy separately, because depending on where your home or how your home's configured depends on how much of that tubing you may need. Now, while we're here, I want to go ahead and show you something else. If, like we said earlier, if you get a unit that has a very large tank and we have to do anywhere from a 9 to a 15 gallon per minute backwash, then you're going to get a brass drain component. Now you're going to thread tape this up and you're going to install the brass drain flow control on it once it's threaded. If you look on the flow control itself, this is a 9 gallon per minute, but there's an actual arrow that shows the flow direction. So you want to make sure that you put this threaded part at the base of the arrow and the arrow's pointing away from it. But this would actually replace this whole drain assembly. You would pull this clip out, pull the whole drain assembly out, and then this whole entire assembly would go in here and the clip holds it in instead. Now, as you can see, this is a 1/2 inch hole and this is actually a 3/4 inch hole. There's a reason they do that, and that's because they want a much bigger drain for a larger flow rate. So for this particular type, if you have this on your model, you're going to want to run a 3/4 hard pipe all the way to your drain source. That way there's no restriction on this at all. You wouldn't want to just get a little barb and adapt this down to this, because that would restrict it too much. You want to use this and you want to stay 3/4 all the way to your drain source. So again, this is on a bigger unit. It's not on this particular unit, but I did want to show you that, so if you get a bigger unit, you'll understand why your drain looks different than the video. So now that we have our connection points discussed, put this back in real quick. We're going to make our connections. So one of the first things we would do at that point is shut off the water like we've done here, release the pressure down line, and then we're going to start plumbing in. Now, when we plumb in to the unit, we're going to plumb straight into the inlet, okay? But when we plumb out of the outlet, we're going to want to go down, and we're going to go over about at least 8 inches, if not further, and then back up again above the unit and run over to our next piece of equipment. The main reason we do that is because depending on the plumbing configurations of the home or how large the home is as far as stories and overall space, we could actually lose air from this tank if we don't make this little loop here. We call it the air catchment loop. So it should come down below the inlet plumbing, come over at least 8 inches or so, and then come back above the inlet plumbing to run to the next piece of equipment. That will actually give you a little bit of an airlock here that will keep the air in the tank so it can do its job. Now, I'm talking about air, but I really haven't explained what this system does. This system uses oxidation to pull out your iron, your sulfur. But to do it, it uses an air pocket inside the tank. So when this thing backwashes, it will actually pull air from wherever this is, whether it's outside or the basement or whatever. So it's a good idea to have some clean air wherever this is installed. But it's going to pull air in, and it's going to put an air pocket in the top of this tank. And then as you use water through the day, water will come in and pass through this air pocket, and then just by chemistry, it's going to oxidize any contaminants in your water, including iron or sulfur. And when it does that, whatever it precipitates and becomes a solid is collected in the carbon substrate in the tank. So what happens is as you use water throughout the day, you use up this air pocket until it is diminished. So if you're a household that uses a lot of water, you may have to backwash this thing every night. If you're fairly conservative, then you may be able to do 2, maybe even 3 days. But it really depends on your contaminant level, as well as how much water you use a day. So keep that in mind. Now, for really high volume usage, and we know we're at a high volume and we know we have a large contaminant level, we would probably go up to our next system, which would be the Fusion Oxygen system. But for most people, this system will work fine. It's just some people with some extreme bad water have to go up to a more robust system. If you have iron bacteria or sulfur bacteria, this system may handle it on a low level. When you start getting to larger levels to where you really are showing a lot of sludge in your toilet tanks and things like that, that's again when we'd have to move up to our oxygen system. So what we want to do now is we're going to install this plumbing. I'm going to go ahead and cut into this PEX. We're using PEX today, and we're using shark bites. That's kind of the fittings that we use, that we have available. Plumbing fittings are going to be a lot cheaper if you're using copper or if you're using PVC or CPVC. But for the purpose of this video and to make it quick, I'm using quick connect fittings, which are the shark bite fittings, and PEX plumbing. So what we're going to do is we're going to plumb everything in, and then we're going to come back and talk about the plumbing that we did, and then we're going to show the drain line connection, and we'll move on to startup and programming from there. So I'm going to plumb this in. We'll be right back. Okay, so we've made our plumbing connections. The first thing that we did is we Teflon taped our 2 shark bite fittings here and screwed them into the bypass. This bypass is 1-inch FIP, so typical 1-inch threads will fit in there, pipe threads. So we brought our inlet in this side, and then we brought our outlet out, and then we did the catchment, the air catchment, as I explained. We came down, I think we came down about 14 inches here, and we came over about 14 inches. Then we came back up to just about 2 inches above the inlet plumbing, and then out to the next piece of equipment or to the home. Now, this is what you would want to do. If you go all the way to the floor and come all the way back up, that's fine. But just don't go straight over with no kind of loop. Some situations you may be okay, but if you're not, you don't want to go back and have to plumb it later. Okay, now that we've done our actual in and out plumbing, we're going to want to hook up our drain line. And as I said before, this barb is a 1/2 inch OD, so you need a tube that's 1/2 inch ID, 5/8 OD. So you want to make sure that you have enough tube here, and you want to make sure the tube is secured too, because it's going to drain with force. So you want to make sure that you have this secured and it doesn't flop around in the middle of the night and wake everybody up. So once you have it cut to size, I'm going to install a little hose clamp on here so we can make sure we keep it secured. We're going to push that down on there, and we're going to put on the hose clamp. And make sure you tighten it down and snug it up. Now, this is basically the installation. Once we've put everything in the tank and we've installed our 3 connections here, we're installed. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually go through the programming and make sure it's programmed properly, and then we'll go through system startup.